Everyone has a bright light inside of them that deserves to be seen by the world. That's why it's time to shine the light on the extraordinary who are accomplishing phenomenal things. This is the Shine Out Loud Show with Lillian Ogbogo.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever in the world that you are. This is another episode of the Shine Out Loud Show. Yes, it's our 2 for a week where we're bringing you 2 shows for 1 week. I mean, I have such amazing people that I couldn't just do 1 show this week because I have a woman that, this woman makes my heart sing because she talks about all the things that excites me because it concerns me as a woman and is actually very much pertinent to me. So I have the incredible, the fantastic, nutritional, hormonally balancing queen of healthcare and well-being, Lanice Brothers. But first of all, before I bring her out, I'm going to give a huge shout out to Tamu of Live 360. Because of you, I have this incredible woman on the show. So I have to say, yes, it's going to be a lit show, as the children will say. Hold on. Lanice, hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction.
You are so welcome. I am so excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here.
Cool. I mean, we started the show before we actually started the show because we got talking. I was like, oops, I have to stop because I have to push record and people can jump in and share this show with us.
Yeah, we have so much to talk about, and what we're going to go into is so interesting. I could talk for hours about all of these things.
Look, I'm glad you can because, that's what we're going to do. So,
okay.
Let's jump in at the very beginning. What is Eat, Love, Move, and who is she here to serve?
So that's just, what a great question. I started my company, Eat, Love, Move, when I was starting my journey as a nutritionist, and I was thinking about what did I want to specialize in, who did I want to serve, and I kept, writers say, write what you know.
Yes.
Well, it's the same with nutritionists, work with what you know. And so in my personal background, I had a lot of issues with menstrual health, really painful periods, hormonal acne, hormonal headaches, anxiety, depression.
Right.
And throughout the years, I had used food and lifestyle changes to either resolve those issues or improve those issues. And that's actually what got me on my journey towards becoming a nutritionist. So when it came to actually setting up my practice, I knew, thinking about my past, that I wanted to help other women who were in a similar situation to me.
Okay. You know what? And I think that's actually very powerful because it's coming from your own personal background and story. So, you've started Eat, Love, Move. You're in business. What were the lessons you learned in the first year of setting up and running?
Oh, wow. I mean, one of the biggest ones was to enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. You kind of think that you'll set up and then people will come to you, but that's just not the case. People have to learn about you. You have to build your reputation. And so it's taken a while, but I feel like I'm in that kind of phase now of people know about me. I'm getting a lot of people talking about me. And from that, through all the conversations I've had with women, either at events or workshops or in my own clinic, is that I see that so many women don't understand what's going on with their bodies. So, you kind of, as a nutritionist, health professional, sometimes it's easy to forget that, people don't know as much as you. So one of the biggest lessons for me, another big lesson for me has been to take a step back and always go back to basics and talk to women about the basics of what's happening in their body. You know, simple things like, well, to me, what I think is a simple thing, but is not, is that many women don't actually understand their menstrual cycles. There are actually 4 phases to the menstrual cycle and different things happening in each phase. And so going back to those sort of basics and breaking them down, and then talking to women about what's actually happening for them and helping them connect some of the things that they've been experiencing has been a huge lesson for me. And it's been so valuable because I can see with the women that I speak to, you know, it's like that kind of light bulb moment. Oh, so that's what's happening.
Okay. So those are the lessons. And, you know, the one thing that I find really fascinating about everything that you do is that on top of the fact that you do all this work from the nutritional standpoint, you're also a yogi.
Yes.
What drew you to yoga?
Oh, wow. I mean, you know, again, going back to my background, and I grew up in a really sporty family. My father played hockey, what you call ice hockey in the UK. And my brother played hockey as well. But when I was growing up, I was always kind of the bookish one. And I never really I played a little bit of sport, but not too much. But then as I got older, I was drawn to, as I was making different lifestyle changes to manage my own health, I got very drawn into fitness and sports. And I realized that I actually was an athlete. And in all of the different fitness endeavors I had tried, I kept coming back to yoga and seeing the effects not only on my body, but also on my mind and my kind of overall sense of well-being. So I decided, after umming and ahhing and kind of thinking, oh, I don't have a typical yogi's body. Maybe I need to do more work on myself before I start to train. I just said, just do it. And I did my yoga teacher training last year.
Okay. Wow.
So, yeah. So, I mean, it's been amazing because one of the things I realize now is that I can be an example to a lot of people who think that yoga isn't for them, and they don't look like a typical, whatever, you know, the typical yogi that you see on Instagram. Okay. I don't look like that.
Yeah, Lanice, so since you opened up that bag, we're just gonna dive right in there because
okay.
You opened the bag. I was gonna wait, but no. Let's dive right in because let's talk about yoga. Because first and foremost, there are lots of us, that women who look like us. Let's put it this way: a lot of Black women still believe yoga is not for them because we go into spaces and we instantly feel unwelcome. And then we're confronted by the very atypical yoga person who is almost, for a better choice of word, being passive aggressive, that we've shown up in this space. And then we're trying to say, okay, hey, yeah, I'm trying to figure this out. And somebody in front of the class who's supposed to be the expert, and you say, yes, so stretch your leg and put it over your head. While you're doing that, rub your tummy. And you're thinking, what? No, my body, what? Doesn't do that. And then their standard response is, okay, so why don't you just lie here and do the corpse pose? And you're thinking, I didn't pay to nap.
Yeah.
So what do you say to women like that?
Well, you know, it's interesting because I hear this a lot, you know, women who go to spaces, so in London, the kind of bigger studios, who don't feel welcome because they don't see anyone that looks like them. Yeah. And they see people who've been going to classes or other yoga teachers doing class who are very flexible and can get into poses that they're just not able to. So there's a kind of a sense of exclusion there. Mm-hmm. But when I say, you know, that what you've just described is not yoga. Yoga is about meeting yourself where you are. Right. And the teacher the role of the teacher is to help you accept where you are in that moment and use the asana, the physical practice, to whatever variation or modification to get to whatever they're teaching. So that teacher telling you, oh, just, that word just, put your leg over your head. For me, that's not, that is not good teaching, because it leads to frustration. It leads to people feeling kind of a sense of rejection of their own bodies, which is not what yoga is about. It's about, okay, this is something that you can, this is for people who have been practicing yoga for a while or more flexible. You can try this pose. This is another option. This is another option. So giving people lots of options so they feel included into the class that they paid 15, 16, 17 pounds for.
And that, I think we need more women like you, because like I said, there's some spaces, and thank God that there are spaces that have now started opening up. And my favorite space, I don't know if you know about the space in Battersea called Even Grace, is a space owned by a woman of color. And
yes.
And she's made it into a very, very inviting space. So I think we need to have more discussion about why yoga is for us, and there isn't one way to do yoga.
No, there isn't one way to do yoga, and what, even thinking about yoga itself, what we're talking about is just the physical side of the practice. And when you get into yoga philosophy, you learn that there are actually 8 different parts of yoga, and asana, the physical practice, which what we tend to focus on in the West, is just one part of it. You could go to a class and do meditation, and that's yoga. You could focus on breathing. That's yoga. There's all different parts of yoga that we bring into our everyday life. And when teachers, they just focus on the physical side of the practice, and they focus on what they're able to do rather than what the students in their class are able to do. It does everyone a disservice, because it makes people think that, well, yoga is just physical movement, and it's not.
Okay. Now, we're going to circle back to yoga. In fact, before we leave, we're talking about spaces that make us feel welcome, and we're talking about classes. You have a class coming up, don't you? Very soon, that is for yoga that looks like us.
Yeah. So it's this wonderful collective. It's called Looks Like Yoga, and every Sunday at 12:30. An hour-long class. It's at Paper Dress Yoga in Hackney Central, just off of Mare Street,
right?
About a minute's walk from the station. And it's yoga for people of color, yoga for inclusion, and it's about lots of modifications, lots of variations. So no one in the class will feel frustrated. They will people understanding that yoga is for them. You don't have to turn up in Lululemon or Sweaty Betty. People turn up in jeans, and they just join in the practice, and it's really fun and inclusive. So check it out. It's going to be, I'm teaching next Sunday. There's a class being taught tomorrow by a lady called Helene. All the teachers are women of color, and it's just wonderful.
Awesome. All right. So, if you give us a link, and we will share the link after the show as well, and, we'll talk about that a bit more. Now, one of your core areas is about our hormones and helping us balance our hormones. Now, the problem is there's so much conflicting information around hormones, and it's hard for us to know where to start. So, what are the basics for us to get our hormones balanced? I think that will be my first question. So what are the basics that we should be doing?
Okay. Let's talk about what a hormone is. So when we talk about hormones, I think we tend to focus really on our sex hormones, so the hormones that drive fertility and the menstrual cycle. But we have hundreds of different hormones that drive so many different functions in our
Yes.
body. There's hormones that help us understand when we're hungry, hormones that help us understand when we're full, when we're tired, when we're thirsty. Um, and so we have lots of hormones governing our body, depending on what's going on for us externally and also internally. But in terms of balancing what we talk, when we talk about hormones, generally we're talking about our sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, um, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, testosterone. I think when we're looking at balancing those hormones, one of the most fundamental areas is understanding the menstrual cycle and understanding what's happening at each part of those hormones, so then you know that you can start to link what you're experiencing to what's happening at that specific part of the menstrual cycle. So
Right.
some women, they come to me and they say, I want to balance my hormones. And then we dive a bit deeper and then we find out, well, actually, what we really need to focus on is issues that happen in the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle, which is right before the period. So typically that's the kind of what we call PMS.
Yes.
Um, and we dive into that, and then we dive into whatever kind of PMS they're having. Other women come to me and they say, I need to balance my hormones, and then it's more about fertility and addressing the issues that come out of that. So I guess what can we do to balance our hormones? To answer your question in a short way, first understand what's happening across the menstrual cycle, and
Right.
what are the symptoms that come out of that you're experiencing that lead you to think, well, I need to balance my hormones, and then go from there.
Okay. All right. So it's understanding what's going on with the body. And,
Yeah.
we're talking about this. We're talking about periods. We're talking about our hormones. We're talking about all of these things that make us us. Then, we're talking about, hey, the regular conversation is, oh, I have a heavy period. That's normal. That's a normal thing. But you're actually saying, no, this isn't normal.
Yeah, I'm saying heavy periods, like heavy periods where you're having to change a heavy tampon 3, 4, 5 times a day, when you're having you cannot wear certain types of clothes because you're not sure if you're going to bleed all over your clothes.
Mm-hmm.
That is not normal. And I think part of this conversation is us understanding what's normal and what isn't. And much about what we've talked about around hormones and periods and the menstrual cycle has been a taboo for
Mm-hmm.
such a long time. So people don't talk about it, so they don't know what's normal, and then they suffer in silence. So you have women who have really heavy periods, and with heavy periods typically comes heavy pain,
Mm-hmm.
and debilitating pain. And they've just been living with it because we use words like the curse when it comes to our menstrual cycles,
Yes.
or
And
all these,
flow.
yeah, and flow, the crimson tide,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all of these things. And we don't actually just get down to brass tacks and just have these open conversations about periods. So they they become just a normal thing rather
Mm-hmm.
than a taboo or something that's a bit icky.
I mean, I am sitting here going, yes, I really want to spend the next 2 hours discussing this, but I think that even would not be enough time, because the fact is, you've just said something that for most of my life I had taken for granted as this is how it's meant to be. Just take some painkillers, you'll be fine. That's what it is. So hey, you have a heavy period. I mean, even the market caters for that. That's why I have, you go and you have the different types of flow tampons, and then you find yourself using more and more and more, and you're thinking, well, but it's normal, right?
Yeah, exactly. We don't know what's normal. Our menstrual education is typically done. If we're lucky, our mothers will give us something, or sister or aunt, but it's typically done by the menstrual product companies, where you
Yeah.
buy a box of tampons and you see the instructions, and that's how you learn. And that
Hmm.
is not right.
Okay, so while we're on the subject, what are some of the other misconceptions about our cycles that you have to dispel? What are some of the other myths out there that we're still walking around thinking this is normal or this is the truth?
Okay, so we talked about pain. So
Hmm.
many women think that pain is normal, and pain. If you wouldn't accept a broken pain from a broken foot, you won't accept a headache. So why do we accept menstrual pain? Like, I'm talking severe menstrual pain, not like the little twinges that we get. Why do we accept that as normal? Why things like headaches and things like mood swings. We think that, oh, I'm just supposed to be a moody cow right before my period. um, and oh, and you have people, oh, she's just hormonal.
Hmm.
Well, we have ebbs and flows of our hormones, and there's times where we're more likely to we different phases of our cycles have different kind of emotions attached to them.
Yeah.
So, for example, right before you ovulate, your testosterone for women, our testosterone levels are higher. So we're more likely to take risks. We're more confident. Our libidos are higher. Um, and no one questions it then. But
Hmm.
right before our periods, where our estrogen and our progesterone levels are lower, and we're more likely to kind of turn inward and maybe be a bit more sensitive, that's where people say, oh, she's just hormonal, when it just shows a lack of understanding of the ebbs and flows of the menstrual cycle.
Um, you see, and that's the thing. And whenever people say, "Hey, she's hormonal," it's never said in a way that it's never positive. It's always
No,
because, yeah, you've been a moody heifer, so yeah, you're being hormonal. Let's just put you in a corner.
yeah, and it's not right, because you it kind of when we look at what's going on with men, they have a 24-hour testosterone cycle. So their testosterone levels will be high in the morning,
Hmm.
and then they will lower as they go throughout the day. But our cycle and it can be anywhere between, say, 23 to 35 days. So, that longer period, our longer period where there are different emotions attached to our hormones, means that there's more likelihood for us to be misunderstood when we're just kind of going through this natural cycle that we're supposed to.
Okay. And we're talking about this. We're talking about the hormones. We're talking about our fertility. We're talking about our periods. And then one of the things that we hardly ever talk about is what are the questions that we as women need to ask our doctors? What are the questions that we need to be asking our nurses when we're going for smear tests? How do we take charge of our own fertility? How do we take charge of our own fertility health care? So that we go into our doctors and have those difficult conversations, or even start those difficult conversations about, well, I think I'm bleeding way too much, or I think, how do we do that?
What a brilliant question. So I think what the first thing that is really important to do is to go to that appointment really prepared. So if you know that you want to talk about your fertility, be tracking your cycle so you know exactly what's going on. You have a sense of when you ovulate. Um, if you're talking to your doctor about your smear tests and say you have some irregular discharge, know the detail of what's happening. Then go armed with information about your body, right. So then you can have a really detailed conversation with your doctor or nurse rather than just kind of speculating. If you're getting blood tests done, get the results. Don't just let your doctor say, oh, everything's okay. Actually ask them to email you or give you the results by hand, because then you can see it for yourself. You can see the data for yourself. So yes, actually everything is okay, rather than accepting their word. And I think this is something that I see in more older women, where there's more of an a perception as the doctor as being completely infallible.
Yeah.
Younger women that I work with tend to, they question more. They would go onto Google. They'll do their own research. I mean, there's pitfalls in that, but they're coming from a place of being better informed and questioning their doctors. So to sum up your question, being informed, knowing what's going on with your health, writing things down, asking questions, and if you don't feel satisfied with the answer, ask again or get a second opinion until you feel like you have a resolution to your question. I think with Black women especially, our health concerns tend to be minimized, and there's this perception of us being able to handle more pain, which we know comes from, slavery and medical racism.
Yes.
And so our concerns tend to be minimized. So go and get the questions. If you don't feel satisfied, get a second, third, fourth, fifth opinion until you get the answers you deserve.
Okay. So you've just touched on something there where you said about how our issues are normally minimized. But do you find that we also hold the misguided idea that we do not have fertility issues, or there's an idea that we do not have fertility problems?
I think, generally speaking, there can be this stereotype that Black women don't have fertility issues. We can look at the historical roots of that from slavery, and Black women acting as wet nurses, and during Reconstruction, you have, if you look at the kind of propaganda that comes out of like the aid sector from different African countries, where you have women surrounded by loads of different children on the assumption that they're theirs. That's where the fertility kind of misconception comes from. So maybe that trickles down to Black women themselves thinking, okay, well, actually, I probably don't have fertility issues. But then you dig deeper, and that a lot of Black women have had miscarriages, have various gynecological issues that affect their fertility. And so sometimes for them, Black women themselves, it can come as a surprise when they find out they actually have fertility issues.
Yeah. And then there's also, when you look around right now, if you're in a gathering of Black women and you say, oh, who has fibroids? It's funny how many women will put their hand up and go, oh yeah, I have it. And it's almost like, yeah, well, it's what Black women have. So yeah, it's kind of, hey, it's again, almost normalized.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is actually something I'm really passionate about. This showing Black women that they don't. It's not a curse that for Black women, that fibroids actually are more common than we know. They tend to be 2 to 3 times more prevalent in women of African origin, but they're not spoken about. We have lots of different campaigns about endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, but where are the campaigns about fibroids when I think it's the stat is something like almost 80% of Black women will have a fibroid. And now, not all Black women, not all women who have fibroids will experience symptoms of them. But we have to, this is where we come back to knowledge. Without knowledge and open discussions of these things, we live with them in silence. And then, you described a situation where who has fibroids, and more women have them than we realize. So we need to talk about these things.
And we do. And, and this is just my personal observation in terms of not just with fibroids, but with a lot of things. It almost feels like Black women have been, and I'm not saying all of us, but most of us have been programmed to be afraid of our own bodies. And so we never investigate our bodies, but till it's too late. And then we don't have the conversations because we haven't investigated our bodies, so we don't know what's normal or what isn't normal. And then we keep it to ourselves because, hey, you know what? We're supposed to be these strong Black women. Strong Black women don't crack. We're fine. We keep it to ourselves and we don't talk about it until it's too late to do something about it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I mean, what you said there was so interesting. We've been programmed to be afraid of our own bodies. I mean, I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah. So, and that was the question I was going to ask you there is, how do you work with your clients to get them comfortable enough to start talking about what's going on with their bodies?
So every client, I work with them in a slightly different way. I always set the expectation that it's really important for them to be honest with me, to open up, because we can't work from a place where they're not giving me all of the information, because I can't do my best to help them. So, but I know that some people, it takes a while for them to get comfortable, and I accept that. So some clients are an open book, and I get all of the information and they just share everything. And that's great. But some clients, I just accept that it takes time. So I try to be, as accepting of that as possible, and ask them questions and work with them in a way that helps them get comfortable, not only with me, but what's happening with their own bodies. Because sometimes, through the line of the various questions I ask them, it's the first time that they've thought about their bodies in a particular way or realized something about their bodies. And so unpicking that and that whole process can be quite emotional. So, it's about holding space, kind of, to use a yoga expression, holding space and helping them understand that they are going through that process is absolutely fine. It's normal, and they shouldn't judge themselves for it. And just to be accepting of what's happening, because that journey will help them meet their health goals.
Okay. All right. So I really want to go back to something that we were talking about earlier, and when we're talking about hormones and understanding how our bodies are working. And one of the things that has been prevalent since the 60s is hormonal birth control. And my question here is, yes, it came in the 60s, it revolutionized everything, but has this really been a good thing for us?
Oh, wow. So whenever I talk about this, I always add the preface that I know that hormonal birth control has been attached to feminism. And I know that, for women, it's been revolutionary in the sense that we've been able to have greater control of our bodies.
Yes.
We can have sex and not have to rely on the man wearing a condom or, whatever form of kind of traditional birth control was used in the past, we can be sure that because we're taking the pill or having an injection or the coil or, whatever, we can be sure that, up to 99% sure that we're not going to get pregnant.
Yeah.
But with all of this, there comes side effects. And there are so many side effects that I see from hormonal birth control that have not been discussed with women when they have been prescribed this birth control. You have girls of 13, 14 being given the pill for very heavy, very painful periods, but without this discussion that during this time, their hormones are trying to regulate themselves. So adding in this synthetic hormone, whether it's the synthetic form of estrogen, whether it's a synthetic form of progesterone, will have an effect on their hormones and their menstrual cycle. And then on the other side, you have women who in their early 30s, mid 30s, who decide that they want to come off of whatever hormonal birth control they're taking and go try to get pregnant. And they then discover that because they've been taking birth control for so long, they have a very thin womb lining. So it's difficult for them to get pregnant, or they don't understand their menstrual cycle, and then they get hit with all of these different side effects.
Right.
And it's too overpowering for them. So they go back on the pill to try to regulate them. Mm-hmm. You're not going to regulate your menstrual cycle by adding in synthetic hormones. All you're going to do is mask the issue. And that's one of my major issues with hormonal birth control being prescribed outside of being birth control, because they're not addressing the root cause. So if you have heavy bleeding, well, let's get into that. What is actually causing the heavy bleeding rather than just masking it?
And there's even more to it, because there are certain birth controls that have more adverse effects for Black women, and we're not being told about that. So things like anything that is, that the new ones that they have, that is the implants, the injections, they have some very, very serious side effects. But we're not going to start pointing fingers today. So my question is, if hormonal birth control is not the way, what are our options?
For actual
birth control,
contraception.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a very personal decision. Some women decide that it's the choice for them, and they accept whatever side effects. But if you've made the choice that hormonal birth control is not the way for you, you can use condoms, and this requires having a really honest conversation with your partner, because you have things happening now, stealthing, I think the term is, where they'll be having sex. A man and a woman will be having sex, and then the man would take off the condom, so but the woman won't know. So if you're not going to use hormonal birth control, it's important to be aware of these sorts of issues. There's also tracking your cycle and knowing when your fertile period is, and using condoms during your fertile period. So your fertile period is a few days before ovulation, all the way up to about day 21, 22 of your cycle. What else? There's also the coil, the copper coil. That is non-hormonal birth control. That has side effects, but you're not inserting synthetic hormones into your body.
Right.
And then there's I think, there's also the female condom, which, for some women, that's an option that they use.
Okay.
I think that's kind of all the options that I can think of right now.
All right. So, yes, and I think this is something that we need to have more conversations around to understand what we can do, what are our options, and if hormonal birth control is not the answer because of what it does to our bodies. I think it's part of the bigger conversation that we need to start having conversations about our body, our fertility, and what's going on with it.
Absolutely. I think, this needs to start, these sort of conversations needs to start when we're young. Even the conversations of like, what do we call certain body parts, and removing the euphemisms and the kind of words that we use to teach children about their body parts that aren't the real words, because there's a sense of shame of saying penis or vulva or vagina or breast. And then as children get older, having conversations with them, really like matter of fact conversations with them about periods and what's happening with their bodies. Even if you have a boy. So I have a son, he's 5.5, and because I have no privacy, he will ask me about, oh, mommy, what's that? And like, cause I use a menstrual cup, he'll ask me about it. And I have a really factual, matter of fact conversation with him. But I also recognize that some people are not as matter of fact as me. And that's one of the big lessons I've learned as well over the last couple of years. It takes people time to get comfortable with themselves and their bodies. Mm-hmm. But if we start this process early, the easier it will be.
No, I absolutely agree. Now, I'm going to swing back to the fibroid conversation that we were having. And I'm going to, conventional medicine seems to have a quick approach of surgery to treat fibroids. Are there any other options that you will recommend before going under the knife?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, it goes back to what I said earlier about looking at the root cause. So what is causing the fibroids to grow? What is causing some of the side effects that come with fibroids? So a lot of fibroids have, so they're non-cancerous growths that are in and around the uterus, and they have their own blood supply. And so for a lot of women with fibroids, they have low iron, they have heavy bleeding. And that in itself can create a vicious cycle of, when you have heavy bleeding, you're excreting a lot of iron through the blood. And then that will lead to low iron, anemia. And then when you have anemia, that can lead to heavy bleeding. So it's a vicious cycle there. But then also when you think about the fibroid itself, what causes fibroids to grow is typically an imbalance between estrogen and progesterone. And that's typically more estrogen in the body than progesterone. And those, what we call estrogen dominance, is driven by a lot of things. So you have the foods that we eat, the things that we put on our skin. So, Black women, relaxers, all the different hair products we use with its chemicals in them. Everything that we put on our skin gets absorbed, and then our body has to deal with it. And it treats it as a synthetic hormone. Right. And when you have all of that, that leads to an imbalance between estrogen and progesterone, and can drive fibroid growth. So going to the root cause of what causes fibroids to grow, and also the root cause of some of the side effects, can be a way that some women can address fibroids. Mm-hmm. I know for some women, they just want to have the surgery. The fibroids are so large that they want to either have a myomectomy, where the fibroid is removed, or an embolization, where the blood supply to the fibroid is cut off. but there are side effects with those two surgeries in themselves, and they don't actually address the root cause of fibroid growth. So it's a difficult one, and it's a very personal situation. But again, it's about going back to the root cause and then working from there.
Okay. So does one have to become a vegetarian to manage their fibroids?
No, they do not. There's a real trend at the moment for people to become vegans and vegetarians. And I will say that I see a lot of vegans and vegetarians who are eating they're eating not well planned diets, and it can make things worse. So
Right.
they're not getting iron through from meat. So you have two different forms of iron. You have heme iron, which you get from animal sources, so typically things like beef and lamb, and then you have non-heme iron, which you get from plant sources. Heme iron, the iron that you get from meat, is easier for the body to absorb than non-heme iron.
Right.
So you already have that situation, and then you have a vegetarian or a vegan who is eating a diet that is not rich in plant-based iron sources. So it can make their anemia worse and can increase some of the symptoms that come out of fibroids. I know that some people, they become vegetarian because they think, well, meat has a lot of hormones. And yes, conventional meat does. But if you're eating meat that is free range, organic, it won't have the hormones and pesticides in it that will contribute to fibroid growth.
Okay. And is it only dietary changes that are required for us, if we have fibroid issues or any fertility issues, or is it more than just dietary changes?
No, there's also lifestyle changes as well that can have effect. So with fibroids, I talked about synthetic hormones. So
Yes.
makeup, skincare, household cleaning products, all of those get absorbed through the skin, and the body has to deal with it in some way. And that can have an effect on fibroids, can also have an effect on fertility as well. I read this really interesting study this week about nail polish. And so conventional nail polish and that being absorbed into the nails and the skin,
Yes.
and that having an effect on fertility. So it's lifestyle changes, but it's also addressing stress. And stress, I mean, I think probably at least like 99% of us deal with stress in some form every day. But so many of us aren't aware of how stressed out we actually are, and they're not actually taking proper measures to address stress. And stress can affect our sex hormone levels. Stress leads to an increase of a hormone called cortisol, and too much cortisol in the body can have a negative effect on estrogen and progesterone. And if you already have an imbalance, it can exacerbate or make those imbalances worse. So we had dietary, lifestyle issues, stress, movement, all of those, looking at all of those areas can have an effect on fibroid growth, and it can have an effect on fertility as well.
Okay. So, recently there have been a whole slew of organic sanitary products turning up. Are these fads or an absolute necessity for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going down the route of using tampons and pads, I would really encourage you to use as organic a product as you can afford. These products can be more expensive than conventional products, but what a lot of us don't realize is how absorbent our vaginas are. And if we're putting something in it that has been sprayed with pesticides and bleaches, because they bleach the tampons to make them white, we're absorbing all of that through our vaginas, and our bodies have to get rid of that somehow. And where our livers are where we break down toxins, and the more toxins that we're having to break down through, sanitary products, through what we're putting on our skin, our hair, what we're cleaning our house with, through our eating, through what we eat, it diverts from the other jobs of the liver, one of which is to break down hormones like estrogen. So our livers can only take so much, and before it starts to have an effect on the balance between estrogen and progesterone. So there's another option in that area is a menstrual cup. And I typically, and this is for women who are really comfortable with their vaginas. So because to put in a menstrual cup, it's kind of like putting in a female condom. There's no applicator. You have to be able to, how do I describe this?
Get all up in there.
Yeah, you get all up in there. And you need to be comfortable with blood and not handling blood, but when you take it out, you might get a little blood on your hand, and you've got to be comfortable with that. But when you look at in the long run, making the switch from tampons and pads to a menstrual cup will save you so much money, because you're not having to buy a new menstrual cup every month. I think you can you replace them every 7 to 10 years.
Okay.
So if you look at the kind of financial savings you get there, and then in terms of what you're not absorbing all of the kind of what we talked about earlier from the conventional tampons and pads. So it's better for hormone balance as well.
Okay. And they even have now these period panties now. They seem to have period panties where you can wear, and they have things in them that absorbs the blood. At the end of the day, you just wash and dry and wear. So again, that's more environmentally friendly as well.
Yes, exactly. Period. I didn't even mention those. A really good option for the environment and for hormones. Because if you just look at tampons and pads, and most women, they actually throw their tampons down the loo, and that's terrible for the environment.
Yeah, it becomes a question, and I think it goes back to, like you said, going back to the basics, because we didn't learn that you didn't get to throw them. It's only like in public places you see the signs, don't flush them down the toilet, but you're thinking, hey, it's my house, I can do what I like. But there was none of that education around, no, you don't throw it away, you don't throw tampons down the toilet, you don't. I think there is that need for us to have those conversations and really take it back to the basics.
I totally agree.
And speaking of going back to the basics, one of the things that coming up, there are a lot of old wives' tales, and around our cycles, there's a lot of old wives' tales now around fibroids. So are there any old wives' tales that are actually solid medical practices in terms of our cycle or fibroids that are out there?
I think, okay, so in terms of fibroids, a lot of women, and actually a lot of doctors still think that, firstly, older women, not older, I shouldn't use the term older women, but women who are 40 plus can have a hysterectomy as a way of removing fibroids, because especially if they've had children, because they don't need their uterus and their uterus anymore. And we know, that's not the case. We do need our uterus. And when even when you have a partial hysterectomy, which is removing your uterus, it will still have an effect on your hormones. And some women, it can send them straight into surgical menopause.
Right.
Other misconceptions, we talked about some of them, the hormonal birth control as a way to deal with period pain, acne, headaches, heavy bleeding. I mean, it's always when you have so many and then you get put on the spot, your mind goes blank.
Okay, you know what? We will circle back round to this. That's absolutely fine. There's so much I want to talk to you about, because we could sit and talk about just everything. But I was on your website and I found out that you have a 5-day sleep challenge. And then my question is, have we been sleeping wrong? Are we sleeping wrong?
Yeah, we are. We are.
You're like, yes, we are.
And it's through no fault of our own. It's just these habits that we get into. We most of us, when we're children, we have these bedtime routines and we have a bedtime. And then as we get older and we have busy days, we're working a lot, and then we get home from work and either we go on to our side hustles or we just want to kind of chill out a little bit. And we stay up really late. We stay up, 11, 11:30, 12, and think, okay, we could just get by on like 6-7 hours sleep. And typically that's fine. But the earlier that you go to bed, the better quality your sleep is. So the best quality sleep is between 10 and 2 a.m. That's when you get your deepest, most restorative sleep. And if you're not going to bed until midnight, you're missing some of that. The other thing is that we're sitting on our mobiles, our iPhones, our iPads, our laptops, watching TV, and the blue light from these screens, it disrupts melatonin production. And melatonin is this hormone that it helps us get sleepy, but it also helps us stay asleep at night. So if we're not producing enough of it, we get to bed and maybe we fall asleep, but we don't have that really deep sleep because we haven't produced enough melatonin. So little things that we can do throughout the day will help us get better sleep. So it's like things like, going outside. Today is a beautiful day. Letting that sunlight hit your eyes so that your body, it knows that it's daytime and your body gets into a kind of rhythm, what we call the circadian rhythm. So the sleep, the day-night cycle. And then when you feel tired towards the end of the day, so acknowledge that rather than pushing through it, and giving yourself a bedtime and giving yourself time to wind down. What we call a kind of we have our bedtime routines when we're kids.
Yes.
Do that for ourselves. So turn your TV off, shut off your mobile, maybe have a hot shower, take a bath, read a book, keep your mobile away from your bed, and then allow yourself, listen to your body's signals, and allow yourself to, when you're sleepy, go to sleep rather than fighting it.
Okay. I think the bedtime routine is definitely needed. When you were talking about going to bed at 12 or later, I was like, I'll just be quiet because that's my life. I was gonna try and lie and make me look better, but I was like, no, that's my life.
It's hard because we have these, we have busy lives and we're trying to cram in so much into the day. But then when you don't get enough sleep, it has so many negative effects the next day. You tend to crave sweet foods. You need like different foods and drinks to give you an energy boost. You tend to, Starbucks, Frappuccinos, and you need these boosts to keep you going. But these boosts are having negative effects on your waistline, and your overall health.
Okay. Now we've come to that part of the show where we talk about our so loud moment of the week. And so, Lanice, what is your so loud moment?
Okay, so I was gonna talk about my yoga, the looks like yoga, but I've already done that. So there are two people that I really want to shout out. So Tamu Thomas, I
Yes.
love what she does. She highlights women's voices over 40, women of color over 40, who typically, you don't get heard about. And she does this beautifully through her podcast. She does this beautifully through her retreats. I had the pleasure of speaking at her retreat a few weeks ago, and it was just what a nourishing, incredible environment. It was just, I don't have a negative just word to say about it. It was just, I left it just feeling like I was on a cloud.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
speaking. I wasn't even participating. So if you ever have a chance to go to one of her retreats, do. I think the next one is going to be in June.
Yes,
So
yes.
go. I also want to shout out, if I can, one more person,
Of course.
Danae Dade. So she does, her company is called, she has two companies, The Spot, and Cookies and Biscuit. And she does vegan catering and baking. And
Okay.
one of her missions is just to get people to eat more vegetables. And that's a mission that's close to my heart. So I just wanted to shout out another woman of color who's doing the same.
Awesome. And I think those two women deserve a round of applause. And it's funny that you mentioned Tamu because, like I did in the very beginning of the show, I mentioned her as well because I'm. It was because of her that I discovered you.
Mm. Yeah, she's
Yes,
amazing.
I know. So that deserves a huge round of applause.
Yay!
Okay, I am loving having you on the show, Lanice, and I have a few more questions for you. And there are things that we would want to discuss some more because there's stuff around burnout, there's looking at everything else that you're doing. But I think the one question that I want to ask is how do you balance motherhood, your relationship, and running your business?
Oh wow. I mean, I'm a big believer that there's no such thing as balance.
Mm,
There's some times where I will have to give my all to my business and I will have to just do what I have to do in the other areas of my life to just keep things running. So, but like for the last week, the focus has been on my son and on my relationship with my husband because it's been half term. So we've been doing different family things and I've been doing stuff with my business kind of as and when I can, squeezing in moments. So I think the idea of balance is a bit of a myth. There will always be things that take precedent,
right.
but what's really important in all of this is acknowledging that and having really open conversations with yourself or with your partner and with your child that about what's going on. So, my son knows that sometimes I have to put him in after school care because I'm doing an event or working with a client. But he knows that the next day, I'll pick him up after school and we'll do something fun.
Okay.
So there's like having really open conversations.
Okay, and that's very powerful. That is actually very powerful to say, yeah, this balance is a myth and I just have to make it work.
Yeah, yeah.
While we're on the subject, because we're in 2018, I said 2018 was sponsored by Wellbeing because you cannot escape it on social media, whatever platform you are on. It seems that social media was awash with well-being, self-love, and all that. So my question is, how can we create practices that won't deplete us more, but really actually serve us?
Oh yeah, that's such a great question. Because you kind of see on social media all of these things floating around about self-care,
Mm-hmm.
and how, self-care isn't selfish. But I think self-care looks very different depending on the individual. For some women, self-care is, you know, being able to just get through the day, to do everything that they have to do, and know that there will be someone, they have a home to go to, they have a meal. It's self-care is doing those basic things for themselves to keep them going, because that's all that they can do. Whereas other women, they have a more expensive form. So taking care of yourself is so individual, but it's, again, going back to basics and making sure you're doing things like drinking water, getting enough sleep.
Mm-hmm.
If you eating vegetables, making sure that you have someone that you can talk to about what's going on in your life. Breathing, so many of us, we don't breathe as deeply as we need to, and we end up hunching our shoulders, hunching over laptops, hunching over our phones. And once we just stop and we take a deep breath, we find that it can change our state, it can calm us, and it can bring a better sense of well-being.
Okay. Those are very simple things. Those are things that can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, what advice, looking at your journey so far, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Oh, 18-year-old Lenise. I would say, don't be so hard on yourself. I would also say that to 39-year-old Lenise, which is how much I am today. I would say, enjoy the journey, enjoy all of the fun things that you're going to do, and don't worry so much about the future. I look back and some of the things I've done, like I lived in Japan for a year. I moved there knowing two people.
Right.
I moved to the UK. I knew one person. All of the different things I've done, setting up my own business, retraining. I are pretty brave when I look back on it, but I've been so focused on getting to the next thing that I don't see what's in front of me and enjoy the present. So enjoy the journey, enjoy the process.
Okay. And we've talked about hormones, we've talked about our fertility, we've talked about so much. And, we have mentioned slightly earlier about burnout. What advice would you offer to women who are feeding the signs of burnout?
Feeding the signs of burnout. I mean, again, it's just what I mentioned, those 5 things about going back to basics, and really being honest with yourself about how much stress you're under and what you're saying yes to. The word no is a complete sentence. And I'm not trying to be glib, but
no, it's a complete sentence.
Yeah, we say yes so often to things that we probably should say no to, if we look at actually everything that's going on in our lives.
Yeah.
And a lot of women, they don't prioritize themselves, and they say yes to so many things, and they end up being burnt out. So saying no, but also finding a way to treat yourself as a priority is a way to help kind of stave off burnout.
Okay. All right. And I would say one last question. Okay, no,
Okay.
I lied too. How can people connect with you?
Okay. My my website is www.eatlovemove.com. Instagram is at eatlovemove. Same with Twitter, and then Facebook is Eat Love Move Nutrition.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and we'll put all your links on your page on our website so people can reach out to you, and if they have any concerns, reach out because you will not regret it. And the final question, poutine in the UK or Canada, which is better?
Poutine in the
Yeah.
UK. I wasn't expecting that question. So I have to say Canada. So I went to university in Montreal,
Okay.
and you get the best poutine in Quebec. Whether it's in Montreal or Quebec City, it's just you get the cheese curds, the gravy, and like the fries. I've had it over here, and it's not been as good. So.
Okay.
And you won't regret going to Canada, to Montreal. It's incredible. So, yeah.
Just in summer, right? We're not talking going to
Oh,
Canada in winter.
no. Oh, I mean, if you're into the snow, if you're into snowboarding or skiing, it's beautiful, but it gets cold. I think today it's like in Toronto, it's minus 5. It's here, it's like 15 degrees. It's just not normal, but yeah.
I will take 15 degrees if it's all the same to everybody, because minus anything, I don't understand. I really. Lanice, it's been my absolute pleasure having you on the show today.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and I will love to have you back in the future, so keep us posted on what's new and what's happening for you, and looking forward to just discovering more about what you do.
Thank you.
All right. Folks, it's a wrap. We've had the incredible Lanice on the show. We've talked about our periods. We've talked about our hormones. We've talked about the misconception that's actually keeping us from finding out and taking charge of our own charge of our own body and our own fertility. We have to understand what's going on with our body, so we have to start asking the question. And if you want to be well armed and understand what is going on with your hormones at different points, I think you could not do any better than contacting and speaking with this woman, Lanice Brothers of Eat, Love, Move. So it's a wrap. You know what to do. If you're enjoying the show, reach out to us and drop us a message. And if you want to be on the show, drop us a message as well. We'll love to hear from you. So catch you same time, same place, and next week.
You've been listening to The Shine Out Loud Show. If you want to connect with us or let us know what you thought of today's show, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Shine Out Show.